Welcome again to the Starlings One podcast. I'm Patrick. Today we are looking at an article that was published in the not super high impact factor, but not not bad Journal of Professional Issues in Engineering and Education Practice, with a study being titled "Teaching Prediction Markets as a Teaching Tool for Undergraduate Engineering Students." So this goes back to 2011 when this article came out. 2012 is when it was published. Basically, it's talking about how they used prediction markets in a class and they had students try to predict some very clearly defined milestones in a construction project. And basically, the key findings or the results or takeaway was most students, about 70% of the students, thought it was super engaging. So you have this notion of active learning which is active learning as you're going through some kind of activity in the classroom. And that's as opposed to just doing the homework or perhaps going to the lecture. This notion of active learning I've read here and there pop up, reading about education, particularly for math or risk analysis, topics that might be harder to get students engaged. And so this seemed to be very positive, actually. It seemed to be an area where prediction markets, at least this educational prediction market, which they abbreviate as EPM, EPMs or prediction markets, seem to do pretty well here. Seems to be a good application fit. So no notes really about the AI podcasters this time around. There's always the kind of weird vocal artifacts you get here and there sometimes, but should be a good one. Hope you enjoy. I almost forgot. Jump on over to starlings.one for more information. Check out all of our different socials, and you can also check out our completely open source and MIT licensed prediction market called Social Predict. If you just search Social Predict on GitHub or just Google or whatever way you want to find it online, you know how to find things. Just search Social Prediction Market. All right, great. Thanks. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something pretty interesting. It's like a stock market, but for learning.
Yeah, a stock market for education.
Exactly. It's called an educational prediction market, or EPM.
And it's a super interesting way to teach students about risk management and making decisions when you're not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, probabilistic thinking and all that.
Exactly. So we're going to be looking at this research paper where they used EPMs with a real construction project at Texas A&M.
Okay, so they actually put this to the test with real students.
Real students, real project, real stakes. Well, virtual stakes at least.
I'm already hooked. But before we get into all the details, can you give us like a quick explanation of what EPMs are? What are we even talking about here?
Sure. So imagine a stock market, right?
Mm-hmm.
But instead of buying shares of companies, students buy shares based on what they think will happen in a real project.
Okay, so they're like betting on whether the project will finish on time or if it'll go over budget.
That's the idea. Will a certain phase be completed on time? Will there be cost overruns? Stuff like that.
So they're like mini project managers with virtual money on the line.
Exactly. They have to analyze data, make predictions, and then see how their virtual investments play out.
That's so cool, but why go through all this trouble? I mean, why not just teach them about risk the traditional way, with textbooks and lectures and all that?
Well, traditional methods, like using Monte Carlo simulations to teach about risk, can sometimes feel a little bit abstract.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like students learn the concepts, but it can be hard for them to really connect it to what actually happens in the real world.
It's one thing to read about risk in a textbook, but it's totally different to actually have something at stake, even if it's just virtual.
Right. And that's what makes this research so interesting. It's looking at whether EPNs can actually help students really get a feel for risk and make smarter decisions.
Okay, so let's dive into this Texas A&M case study. They had over 120 students, 2 whole classes, and they were following a real construction project.
Yeah, it was a big one.
What exactly were they trying to predict?
So the students were trying to predict 2 main milestones in the construction of a new building at the university.
A new building? What kind of building?
It's a veterinary school building, a pretty big project.
Wow, so they were dealing with some serious construction stuff.
Yeah, and the 2 milestones they focused on were structure top out, which basically means getting the skeleton of the building up.
Okay, the basic structure.
Yeah, and substantial dry-in, which means the building is basically weatherproof.
Makes sense. Those are big steps in any construction project.
Huge.
But were these students just kind of thrown into this prediction market blindfolded? Did they even know anything about construction?
Oh, no. They had a ton of information to work with.
Like what?
They got weekly reports, schedule updates. They even had photos straight from the construction site.
Photos. So they could actually see the progress.
Yep, all provided by the contractor.
Wow. That's like super immersive.
It was the real deal. They had to think like project managers, analyzing all this data and making judgment calls.
So it wasn't just about textbook knowledge. They had to really think critically and use what they were seeing in the real world.
Exactly. They had to anticipate risks and make predictions based on what was actually happening.
It's amazing. I'm looking at these price charts from the study figures 2 and 3, and it seems like you can actually see the students learning as the project goes on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, look at how their trades changed over time. It's like they started to understand the risks better and adjust their predictions based on real information.
You're picking up on some really interesting stuff there. For example, see how the trading volume spikes every time a new report came out from the contractor.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
That shows that the students were really paying attention. They were absorbing that information, updating their thinking.
So it wasn't just a random buy and sell frenzy. There was real thought behind their actions.
Absolutely. And it's like the market itself became a learning tool, reflecting what the students were thinking, maybe even their worries.
And get this, it looks like the market actually predicted how the project would turn out.
Oh, are you saying the students foresaw the future of the construction project through their little virtual investments?
Well, maybe not foresaw the future, but it seems like they picked up on some warning signs.
Go on.
Both of those milestones we talked about, structure top out and substantial dry-in, they didn't happen when they were supposed to.
Right.
And you can see that reflected in the final share prices. They tanked when it became clear the project was going to be delayed.
That's one of the fascinating things about prediction markets in general.
They can actually be pretty accurate.
Sometimes, yeah. It's like the wisdom of the crowd or maybe the anxieties of the crowd.
Right. So even though the actual project managers might have been more optimistic, the students collectively, they saw the writing on the wall.
They did. They really did.
Okay, now I'm really curious to know how the students felt about this whole experience. Did they like it? Was it too stressful?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Were they like, this is amazing? Or are they pulling their hair out stressed over their virtual portfolios?
Well, the researchers, they asked the students what they thought. They did surveys and got some really interesting feedback.
Okay, spill the tea.
Over 70% of the students said the EPM was engaging.
So they didn't hate it.
They actually liked it, which is pretty cool when you think about it.
That's not what you usually hear about, like school assignments.
Right. And get this, almost 70% also said the EPM helped them see how what they were learning applied to the real world.
Well, yeah, it makes sense.
Like they were following a real project.
Right, with real deadlines and real budgets.
Yeah, and they got to see how their predictions actually measured up against what happened.
It's like a crash course in real-world risk management.
Exactly. And here's the kicker.
Okay, hit me.
More students said they felt good, like actually enjoyed the EPM, compared to regular homework in textbooks.
Hold on, so you're telling me they'd rather play the stock market than read a textbook?
It seems that way, at least in this case.
I mean, I get it. It's way more fun to learn by doing than by just sitting there listening to someone talk at you, right?
For sure. And when you're actually involved, you learn so much more.
So it sounds like EPMs have a lot going for them.
They do.
They're engaging, they're relevant, and apparently they're even kind of fun.
Yeah, but it wasn't all perfect, of course.
Right. There had to be some downsides.
Oh, yeah. There were a few things that came up.
Like what?
Some students said they felt confused.
Oh, yeah. I bet it's a lot to take in at first.
Especially at first, yeah. There's
Yeah.
definitely a learning curve with this kind of thing.
It's not like anything they've done before.
Right. And some students were also worried about the whole gaming the system thing.
Gaming the system.
Like, what if some students tried to cheat or manipulate the market?
Oh, I see.
Like, if they knew something the other students didn't, and they spread rumors to make prices go up or down.
Ah, to make a profit.
Exactly. The paper does mention that a few students were concerned about that kind of stuff, although there's no evidence that it actually happened in this study.
It's still an interesting question, though, right?
For sure.
Like, on the one hand, you want students to think strategically and use all the information they have.
Right. That's part of the learning process.
But on the other hand, you don't want them to be unethical just to win the game.
It's a tough one, for sure. It's a good reminder that even in a simulated environment, the choices we make matter.
It's like a mini lesson in ethics.
Exactly. So yeah, EPMs definitely have a lot of potential, but there are some ethical things to think about too.
Okay, so big picture, what does all this tell us about using these EPMs in education?
Well, I think this research shows us that there's a real hunger for more hands-on learning.
Yeah, students want to be involved.
Exactly. They don't just want to sit there and be lectured at. They want to actually do stuff.
And when they're actively engaged, they learn more and remember more.
Right. And this study shows that EPMs can be a really effective way to do that, especially when you're teaching about complex topics like risk management.
You know, it's funny, we were talking earlier about how traditional methods like Monte Carlo simulations can feel kind of abstract,
Mhm.
but EPMs seem to solve that problem.
They really do. They make it real,
Yeah, students get to actually experience risk and decision making.
and they get to see the results of their choices, which is huge.
It's not just about learning the theory, it's about applying it in a real-world setting.
Exactly. It's a much more immersive and, dare I say, fun way to learn.
Okay, so could EPMs be used in other subjects too? Like, could you use them in history to predict what might have happened? Or in political science to analyze election results?
I mean, why not? The possibilities are endless. It's like, what if learning wasn't just about absorbing information from a textbook?
Yeah, what if it was about actively engaging with the material, making predictions, testing things out?
Exactly.
It would be so cool.
It would be a total game changer.
But hold on a sec, we can't just ignore the elephant in the room here.
Which is?
This whole gaming the system thing,
Ah, right.
is that like a deal breaker for EPMs? Or is there a way to manage it?
It's a valid concern, and I think researchers are definitely trying to figure out how to deal with it.
I mean, you don't want students to be discouraged from thinking strategically,
Exactly.
but you also don't want them running around manipulating the market and being unethical.
Right. It's a balance.
So what can you do?
Well, one idea is to have some kind of peer review system,
Oh, like where students check each other's work and make sure everything's above board.
Exactly. Or maybe even a moderator who can step in if things get out of hand.
It's like having checks and balances just like in a real financial market.
Right. And you could even use the potential for gaming as a teaching opportunity.
What do you mean?
You could talk to students about the ethical implications.
Oh, I see.
Like, hey, here's how you could manipulate the market, but should you? What are the consequences of that?
Turn it into a lesson on ethics.
Exactly. It's about being aware of the complexities, recognizing that there are no easy answers, and helping students learn how to navigate those complexities.
So in a way, the challenges of EPMs can actually make them even more valuable as a learning tool.
I think so. It's about embracing the messiness of the real world.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into EPMs, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What's that one thing that really made you go, I never thought about it that way before?
You know, it's hard to pick just one thing, but I think for me the big takeaway is that active learning, it really works.
Yeah, it's not just a buzzword.
Right. It's about giving students a chance to really engage with the material, to get their hands dirty.
Just experiment.
Exactly. And this study shows that when you do that, when students aren't just passive listeners, but active participants,
They learn more.
they learn more, they understand it better, and they actually enjoy the process.
Imagine if we could bring that kind of energy to all subjects, not just engineering.
Right. What if history class was about predicting how events might have unfolded? Or in political science, you could use EPMs to analyze elections.
Oh man, that would make things so much more interesting.
It would totally change the game.
It's like we're so stuck in this old model of education,
Yeah.
Teacher stands at the front of the class lecturing students, take notes.
Right. It's all about transmitting information.
But what if we flip that on its head? What if learning was about exploring and experimenting and, even taking risks?
Of course, in a safe environment.
Of course. But still giving students a taste of the real world.
The real world with all its complexities.
Exactly. And that's what I think is so powerful about EPMs.
They're not just about teaching content. They're about teaching how to think,
How to solve problems.
how to make decisions.
And how to navigate a world that's increasingly complex and uncertain.
Exactly.
Those are the skills that really matter, right? No matter what field you go into.
Absolutely. And that's what the deep dive is all about.
Taking these complex topics
Breaking them down.
and finding those little nuggets of insight, those aha moments that make you go, I never thought about it that way before.
It's about giving you the tools to think critically, to be curious, and to keep asking questions.
Because in a world that's overflowing with information,
The ability to think for yourself, to sift through all that noise, and figure out what's really important.
that's more valuable than ever.
Couldn't agree more.
So we hope this deep dive into EPMs has sparked your curiosity.
We hope it's given you some new ideas to think about.
And maybe even inspired you to explore this topic further on your own.
Who knows? Maybe you'll even create an EPM of your own.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.